Hello, everyone. Welcome to PRovoke Media's video conversation on creative branding in China, which we're very happy to bring to you with the Orangeblowfish. Featuring in today's conversation, we have Hilda Chan, who's Managing Director for Greater China at Asics. Welcome, Hilda.
Hello, hi everyone, hello.
And we have Siu Tang, who's Founder and Creative Director at the Orangeblowfish. Welcome, Siu.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Arun. Hi, Hilda.
Hello.
Well, thank you both for joining us. So let's get into it. Obviously, a lot has changed in terms of how retail brands are connecting with consumers in China. The Orangeblowfish has been very helpfully talking our readers through some of those changes, through some of the content it's produced on our site. And what we have here, I think, is an opportunity to really dig into some of those lessons with a company that's kind of been on the front lines of all of these changes and this sort of broader transformation, I think, in terms of how global brands are engaging with local consumers in such a critical market, China. We've had pandemic lockdowns, and now we have this so-called new normal, where people are back in stores. And that kind of happened in China to some extent ahead of the rest of the world. So there's lessons for the world from China's experience. And there's also, of course, I think, broad lessons in terms of how global brands get their consumer marketing right in a country where local insight is so critical. So there's a few things, I think, here that are of real interest. So let's get this underway. So Hilda, if I could start with you, very simply, how is Asics localizing its creative approach to better appeal to Chinese audiences?
Yes, I think what we're doing here in China is obviously we have our global campaigns and we have our, the global messages every year in our marketing campaigns. What we're trying to do in China is really to create a emotional bonding between what the message that we're trying to give to the Chinese markets. That is really still staying relevant to what our brand is trying to communicate. So I think building the emotional bonding between the brand and with the customer, it's really very effective into having the Chinese consumers understand about the brand. And it really does help to form a linkage between the brand itself, between the company's philosophies, its DNA, and also to the Chinese consumer. We do a lot of localization, so the message is the same. It's consistent with globally. However, we are applying the same message, but mostly into a Chinese context that is more relevant for Chinese consumers. So, the message is the same, but how we actually implement and what kind of methods we use in China market could be a little bit different from global. Yeah.
Sure, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into this conversation. Siu, over to you. What do you see in terms of global brands localizing their creative approach in China, and how do they, I suppose, achieve that kind of relevance at a local level?
So I think we've been here I've been here, and I think as a company we've been here for 10+ years now. And when we first started out, I think that the mindset was very much we've got a great brand, we're from America or from the UK or Australia, come buy our products because we're awesome, and we're from overseas, and again, brands have a legacy, and that's ultimately something that people do buy into because there's a level of authenticity that they can talk about, and they have that experience, that expertise. But again, it's how do you communicate those messages to consumers here in China? We think about it more traditionally as when you experience a brand, typically you might be going to, for example, to Paris, and you'll come across a luxury brand, And as you're experiencing that brand in that market, then you can really kind of communicate some of your core values, because you're in Paris, and that's where your products are made, and so consumers kind of have that connection. But now with so many brands coming into China with the current state, with COVID, we find that the most important thing is that customers, the companies coming into China really need to spend more time understanding local insights, and also how to have their brand strategy applied to the Chinese consumer, rather than thinking, we've got a great brand, you're going to love it, but why would they love it? What are those core essence, those core values of that brand that would appeal to a consumer, and their kind of everyday kind of usage, even, I would say. I'm going to go a little bit off point here, but what we see is a lot of brands coming into China is they have this global strategy and they try to apply it, but some of those events, those stories aren't always applicable. We've just had Valentine's Day. I guess that timestamps this interview, but we just had Valentine's Day. That's Valentine's Day for the whole world, but China, their Valentine's Day happens in the middle of the year. So campaigns that are aimed at Valentine's Day for the global, they kind of work and they still apply, but actually most people didn't celebrate Valentine's Day. Had talks with our team. Did they do anything special? And they were like, no, we celebrate later. So it's understanding just simple things like that, and then we talk about Chinese New Year as well. A lot of companies have their big push as that is their Chinese campaign. Again, Chinese New Year is actually the Lunar New Year here in China, because it's just the new year. So it's not, we don't call it the Chinese New Year, it's actually the Lunar New Year. And I feel like there's so many, and then that's just the very surface of it, when we think about understanding Chinese consumers, understanding that there are so many differences, different occasions, different moments. And then also their expectations in terms of, as a consumer group, there's so many subsets, you're talking about millennials, Gen Zers, their experiences and their cultures are so vastly different from the Western world, and other countries, that, having someone locally on the ground to understand this and listening to their insights, rather than, as Hilda said, yes, you have a global strategy, but how will that be applied locally? And you might not be able to take the whole message, and you might be able to take a part of it because only a part of it is relevant locally. So it's how do you take those messages and those stories and really apply it and resonate to the consumers here in China?
Yeah, the importance of local insight, it sounds obvious, right? But it's kind of amazing how often global brands get it wrong. I mean, Hilda, as a global brand, you've been on this journey for quite a while in China. What are the lessons that you would say you've learned from these experiences that perhaps others can apply?
Right. As Siu said, I think China market is quite a critical market for for most of the international brands, I would say. And obviously the local insights are very important. Now in China market, we are faced with a market where trends go really fast. So whatever's happening, today, we say that if you don't come and see China for a year, the next year, things probably is going to be changing. So, in a market where trends go really fast, and obviously, as Sil also mentioned, we have different, we have Gen Zs, we have the millennials, we have maybe consumers, maybe in our ages. So, each of these consumer represents different behavior and obviously their values, and also, their consumer behavior move fast. I would say that China is probably the most competitive market in the world, not because, we are faced with, the moving trend. However, I think most of the international brands, everybody wants to have their space in China as well. And, in particularly in our industry, there are also very strong domestic brands as well, which are operating in China. So, you know, with under this fast and always changing market, I would say that, you know, it's really important to always have kind of a trial and error mindset, because, you know, things that what we've done may not be successful. Okay, so if it's not successful, then, you know, it's always there's always room for adjustments, and there's always room for, you know, fine tuning your strategy, fine tuning your method to make it better in the market. The other one is obviously is because we are changing so fast, and especially, you know, in the digital world where in a way China is very much advanced. It's really important to be open to new ideas, even though, you know, you may not be able to catch up with what's happening, you know, the latest. You may know it too well. However, it's really important to maintain a open mindset, just to try, you know, a pilot test or small projects to see that, you know, it may work or it may doesn't work. Obviously, you know, the whole marketing integration into the digital and offline experience, it's very important. So, as I said, the content's driven, the storytelling, content is what really matters right now. So it's really important to really, you know, dig into the brand, visualize the contents, and to make sure that we have the right contents for all of the touch points. The last thing I would say is actually it's pretty much related to, you know, because everything is happening so fast, the trends are, you know, very fast as well. I would probably advise that, you know, don't forget the brand DNA. Because with such a busy market and everybody's trying to have a voice in the market, it's quite often very much easy to be carried away, you know, into what's happening here in the market. However, you know, as brands, we have a long legacy, we have our own DNA, we have our own heritage. It's really important, you know, with whatever's happening. Yes, we need to have the pilot test. However, you know, don't forget your brand DNA, because that's what make us, that's what make most brands vary their values in the China market. Yeah.
Yeah, really good points, actually, all of those. Siu, did you have anything to add on there in terms of the lessons that you've seen?
Exactly as Hilda was just saying there, you know, things change so quickly, and I find, you know, if you're trying to play catch up with trends and things that are, you know, just in popular culture right now, you're always going to be oh, Hilda back. She's leaving. I think she's going to join back. Should we wait for her to come back in first? Oh, there you are. Let me just admit her back in. Hey, Hilda, oh, you just wanted to switch the side of the screen there.
Yes, sorry.
You're on my right side now.
The connection kind of lost, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I was just going to say, you know, exactly as Hilda was saying there, you know, if you're trying to chase these trends and these fads that are happening all the time, within social media especially, I think now we've been more connected than any other point in history with each other and social media and content, that, you know, you could really get swamped down by that. And so working, you know, creative and also doing branding ourselves for clients, it's about focusing on your own core values as a brand. You know, what is your brand DNA? Exactly, she was just saying there, for Asics, for example, you know, Asics has always been about this performance shoe. You know, it's always been known as one of the best shoes for professional runners. So that's, you know, kind of baked into the core of the brand. So rather than kind of chasing after fads, it's how can you talk about that and really be passionate about it, but also address people's pain points. You know, I think a lot of the time, you know, brands kind of talk about all the good things, but I think more nowadays people want you to be honest. And, you know, if things didn't work out, then exactly as Hilda says, how do you change, act fast and change? You know, for another client, we were working within retail, you know, there was a big change in some of their products. Some of the ingredients had changed out, and, you know, we pulled an all-nighter to help them to change out the digital content on their digital platforms as well as in physical stores. And that was like 24 hours of madness, because we had Hilda smiling because she's probably done something similar before where something hasn't worked. And you want to be honest with consumers and, you know, need to address those things quickly. And I find exactly as Hilda says, it happens so quickly here that we need to move quickly and address these things. But also, I think, you know, on the other side of things, you know, where, you know, what we need to do, you know, for future clients listening, it's always about planning, right? Because if we have our own DNA and we have our brand stories and we have our big strategy for the year, is how does that get implemented throughout the year? So having a plan throughout that 12-month period and knowing what we have already scheduled in, but also what fun things we could drop in, you know, to surprise and delight customers as well with brands throughout the year. I think that's really important as well. So, you know, I think there's kind of both sides, and we find sometimes companies are very reactive, and then they end up not having an overall long-term game plan, and then that kind of suffers because, you know, we've also been on that side where we're doing planning and it's kind of like, oh, what's your plan for this year? We don't really have one, and you're kind of like, okay, well, you know, we can work month by month, but then you're always kind of revisiting the same things, which is always talking about the brand anyway. So it's better to have that big planning session up front, do your insights, understand consumers, but then also do that audit as well on a continual basis, because as Hilda says, you know, things change so quickly here. You know, 12 months.
It changes quite a lot. Yes.
Yeah, right. You know, you turn around like, oh my God, you know, everyone's using a new platform now, you know, on social media, or, you know, there's mini apps, programs, you know, everyone was using H5, for example, on WeChat for years. Then all of a sudden they're like, we're no longer doing H5. It's all mini apps now. Inside mini programs within WeChat. And if you're not continuously kind of auditing and just being aware of how consumers' trends, tastes, purchasing behavior is changing, you end up, you know, being 2 or 3 platforms behind, or not engaging consumers at the right point, and kind of your brand message getting lost. So you know, yeah, these are the kind of lessons that we're learning. You know, we're always kind of, but that's the exciting thing as well. I find, you know, that there is so much happening, that, you know, there's all these new technologies, and you get this new playground of like AR, VR. There's a lot of talk about VR, but let's not go there. Don't know if the metaverse is my thing right now. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's on that note. I mean, both of you mentioned how quickly things change in China, and if you're not there for a year, then you're kind of out of date. And obviously, it's been a you know, an interesting period with the pandemic and with the lockdowns. I'm curious to hear if you know, if there are more changes that either of you have seen in terms of creative trends in China, and indeed how, you know, global brands, global companies can capitalize on those trends. So Hilda, over to you first, please.
Sure, it's interesting. I think it's because pre-COVID, I think most of the emphasis was really on, yes, e-commerce, and e-commerce. However, I think there was always a discussion between, you know, okay, should we be really abandoning our offline stores? I think that's some of the strategic discussions that most international brands, or most brands, probably have. We're seeing a trend that ever since actually, you know, post-COVID, within China, that there is definitely a lot more investments into the retail area in terms of offline. And definitely, you know, we are seeing that a lot of brands are really changing their offline environment into more of a service area, where consumers, is no longer about, you know, selling up your products, but it's really about, you know, how do you incorporate your product and also your brand service into the whole consumer journey, starting from either online to offline, or maybe vice versa. So we're seeing a lot of that, especially after post-COVID. Definitely, you know, with the creative world, I think it's because it's we used to have an import of cultures into the market, you know, an import of maybe Western culture, an import of maybe, you know, other culture into the market. However, we're seeing a rise of, you know, Chinese culture being incorporated into the designs as well. So we're also seeing that, you know, in the recent years, there's an integration definitely between the West and East. By means of East, you know, there's obviously the Chinese, modern Chinese essence. There's also Japan, Korea, Southeast Asia. These are very much, very integrated. Maybe Siu can do a better job at this, with me explaining. But we're seeing a lot of diversification in terms of the creative environment here. Obviously, there's a lot of new technology. I think every brands are trying to utilize some kind of new technology to express their brand message. Definitely, I think, for global brands, is really a good platform. I think China is a very good platform for brands to experience with new ideas, new concepts, and new technology, which maybe could be for export into, out of China potentially, I think. I think it's a really good market to actually to have brands experience, a lot of things, a test pilot market, for example, for global brands to really capitalize on these trends. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. That idea of actually using, learning from China, I think is a really important one. And I do wonder how many global brands are really that open to it. Siu, what are you seeing in terms of creative trends and particularly, as it relates to retail, I think it's quite interesting, right? Because you do now have lots of people back in stores.
Yeah, so I mean, exactly as Hilda was saying there, about COVID, pre-COVID, I think everyone was going online platforms, ordering food online, groceries online, shopping online, consuming content online. And then COVID hit and we found ourselves learning online, experiencing the world through our mobile phones. I know my eyesight's shot now because I've spent way too much time looking at digital devices. It really has. It's gone terrible. But we spent so much time consuming information online that when we were allowed out again, we were the first, in terms of countries, because we experienced that initial wave. It was crazy, and we were locked down. And so when we were allowed out again, the ability to experience in person, going to a restaurant, going shopping, meeting with friends, going to an art gallery, going to public spaces, everyone just went out in the droves, safely, of course, but still we wanted to experience things for ourselves again. And that doesn't mean that we then all of a sudden said, you know what, I don't want to shop online anymore. I don't want to order my my lunch online, because I think there still is very much that digital part of our lives which coexists with our physical selves. I know it sounds all very meta, but it really has been this. How do we now? Consumers want to go out and they want to experience things. How do public spaces kind of change, and how do retail spaces change? So, example, what Hilda's saying there, what we found is a lot of the retail experience work we do, it's not just about people shopping there, because actually, I think again there was a time where people wanted to encourage people to shop more in store, and then they were like, okay, actually, why do we need physical retail spaces? Let's shut down all our physical retail spaces, and people will just buy on Amazon, or they'll buy on Taobao, or whatever platform they choose, whichever country. But actually, people still want to experience those brands. They might not buy in store on the same day, and they might go to the official account to purchase, but they still need an experience with a brand, physical experience with a brand, to build kind of that passion and understanding. So those physical spaces now have adapted. We found a lot more of the brands that we work with think about their spaces as a community space, a learning space, whereby it allows consumers to go in there and actually understand more about the community that the brand services. For example, I know Hilda's just opened a new space in Taikoo-li, right?
Yes.
On the waterfront. And it's a runner's hub. So there's a running track on the top, right? Am I getting this right? And then there's also services to help people improve on their running gait and posture, choosing the right footwear. Again, ideally, I'm sure you'd love people to buy in the store, right? But if they don't, and they get those shoe measurements, and then they go home and they buy online, because that's ultimately the convenience, right? If I'm in the office, would I buy the shoe and take it back?
We're actually going to be providing free shoe rental service as well.
Wow.
Yes, through the store starting next month. Yeah. So we're going to be actually doing that. So we're actually enhancing the services as well at the retail store, as part of the consumer journey. Yeah. In addition, to some of the running services and, the running events that we do at the store on a weekly basis. Yeah.
Yeah. And presumably the shoe rental, that's in response to a
Yes.
local insight as well.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And it's really good opportunity, to also, have the feedbacks from the consumers as well, especially with the new product trials. You don't necessarily have to pay that first, but you can, try it out and then, have a run in it and see and come back to the store to get a pair if you're interested. So these are all of the value added services from the brand, in a way to really to have our customers experience what we can provide. Yeah.
That's exactly what I was talking about. So the community, right? And it's thinking
Yes.
not for profit first, but actually what do we provide to our consumer? What is that value we're adding to them? And I think that's what a lot of brands are trying to do. We work with another brand, a beauty brand called UC, which is part of the L'Oreal group. It's a Chinese brand, but L'Oreal took the brand under their wing to grow the brand even more. And they offer skin testing, skin run service in store. And what that does is, again, it's that bridging of the digital and the physical spaces. We still have digital content. And the idea is then once you've done your skin test, it tells you what kind of skin type you are, and then what products are right for you. And then you have that on your phone. And you can take that away, review that and assess it at your own time. And you can go back in for checkups to see, because obviously our skin type changes depending on the weather, seasons and how much sun you've had. So again, it's about, creating content that, still connects you to a physical world, but also allowing you to, because I think about it from a retail perspective. I think the ideal thing is sometimes when we're designing, we're like, put down your phone and come experience this space that we've designed. But the reality is people will go into these spaces and still be having their phones, but it's how to engage them as a person, but also engage them with their phone. And not to expect them to change customer behavior and all of a sudden have their phone in their hand and all of a sudden expect them to put it down and put it away for an hour, because that won't happen. But it's how do you engage them and their device at the same time? And then when they've got that content, how do they take that content away and consume it at their own time as well, and help educate them? And that's also the interesting thing is, so it's kind of gone digital, it's gone to in person, then it's back to digital. That then feeds back into this loop of how do we constantly improve it, and the customer experience.
So we just have a few minutes left, and I think for the last question, I just wanted to get your insight into, I suppose, the most common hurdles that global brands need to overcome when it comes to appealing to Chinese consumers. And I know this can be quite a big question, and there's often a lot to go through. So maybe if we just, in the interest of time, we just try and limit it to the most, the most popular issues you've seen, or the ones that are really top of mind for you at this sort of, unique juncture, I think, in terms of emerging from the pandemic. So Hilda, how do you see it?
Right. I think just to keep a long story short, because there's a lot of hurdles, I think. However, I think it's really about understanding about the Chinese market, because China is a big country. Whatever happens in the north may not represent what China is in the south. So even within China, I think there's a lot of local insights when we look at within China. So it's really important to understand those differences within China. Two is, I do think that, with a lot of global brands, it's really important to realize that, the digital ecosystem or the digital platforms that whatever, global brands are using internationally really don't work in China, because we're on a different digital ecosystem here. So, it's a really, it's a strategic questions into, what kind of things we should localize and what kind of things, we should follow, global. I think that's probably one of the most common hurdles or discussions that global brands have. Last but not least, I think it's really about merging the marketing campaigns together, because we're only not talking about PR today. We are talking about how do we incorporate or integrate the whole marketing campaign from all of the different consumer touch points while trying to keep the brand message consistent with global. So I think it is really quite demanding for the marketing team here in China to really integrate a closed circle between your omni-channels here. So I would say these are some of the key points for takeaway. Yeah.
Yeah, very, very good list. Siu, over to you.
So again, I think we've touched upon all of the key areas, which is to plan, adapt, test, and engage. So again, plan, have a long-term strategic plan built on insights that you've engaged a local partner to ensure that they're relevant and they're still relevant in 2022. And then test, as Hilda was saying, building out small test spaces, having flagships or test stores to then again go back to the engage to talk to the consumers to see what the feedback is. Is this working for you? And then being nimble enough, even for large organizations, some of the big companies we work with, they're very flexible to move quickly to ensure that they keep adapting to the market changes. And keep an open mind, really. I think this moment in time in China right now is the most interesting, where so many things are happening and changing all the time that really there's so much freedom, and I feel lucky as well to be here in China at this point in time, because there's so much creative freedom for what we can do and things that we test out. I remember working on a project with Budweiser where just after COVID we built a video game to go into nightclubs, and I think back maybe 5 years ago, having an idea like that, and we had a similar idea in a pub, and it was kind of like in a brewery, and they were like, oh, I'm not sure if that works. And now people are so open-minded with just trying out new things. So I think that's the big takeaways. Yeah, keep an open mind. China is a very different marketplace from what it was.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's really encouraging to hear, and we definitely look forward to seeing some of these ideas emerge. And I think there's a real opportunity for brands and other markets to learn from the experiences that China is going through, and to learn from a complex market where the value, I guess, of being open-minded, of being able to take risks, being able to adapt to new technologies, new types of content, new forms of storytelling, is becoming so powerful. So thank you both. Some really useful.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, no, it's really useful and interesting insights. And I hope you both have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ruan. Thank you, Hilda.
Thank you.
Okay, so you can stop recording.
Okay.
Now, that's cool.
There we are. Stop recording.
Good.